Here's the thing.
Just like,
See all this pile of trash behind us? Everything behind us has come out of our boat.
Yeah.
Yes, there's probably like some peel ply and maybe a couple like buckets or paintbrushes or something in there. But generally speaking, that's all wood, bulkheads, fiberglass, stuff we ripped out.
but before the trash truck comes to pick everything up, we have to bag everything
Yeah.
into those giant trash bags and consolidate it, and then and then the trash goes away. So
That's what we're doing this afternoon. Hopefully none of it blows away with all this wind. That's still just ripping through here, but we still get charged by the kilo for it.
Yeah.
So we're gonna be very frugal in how much trash we make because we don't want to spend money on throwing stuff away. That's silly. Yeah, let's get started.
let's get started.
Covered in fiberglass dust though, so we're still gonna mask up. Really heavy. I can't even lift it.
This is what Uma used to sound like every time we went sailing. Remember?
Yeah, I remember. You're bringing back the trauma. All right, guys. Well, today we have a special topic to talk about.
We have gotten one question over and over and over and over and over again, and so today it's finally time to talk about it.
Yeah, and that is about weight.
The one thing you're not supposed to talk about. I'm gonna do a whole video about Uma's weight and how
She got a fat ass.
she doesn't. She's got like a tiny
Has a
tiny,
baby ass.
tiny booty. It's like it's a little tiny booty.
Okay, so let's talk about weight a little bit and why that matters when it comes to boat design and boat structures.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Generally speaking, the more a boat weighs, the slower it sails. Now, that's a super generality because it has a lot to do with hull shape and sail performance and riding movement. Like it has way more to do with all that. But if you have two identical boats sailing in the exact same conditions, like on a race, for instance, on a matched race with the same hull, the heavier boat will probably lose if it's a lot of extra weight. Otherwise, it's down to the crew and the tactician and the choices they make. But generally speaking, a heavier boat sails slower. But that's also not the whole picture because a heavier boat also tends to be more comfortable. Even just moving our boat from the marina to take the mast out and over to the shipyard, we noticed how much more unstable she was with the wake and the wind because she was, thousands of kilograms lighter. So it's not just about weight, it's about a lot of other things too, but weight obviously does matter in a boat because the heavier the boat, the more water it displaces, the more power it's going to need to go a certain speed. Now, where this really makes a difference is with boats that can get up and sail on the water instead of like us, we sail in the water. So boats that can plane rather than displace water.
Catamarans.
Like catamarans, performance monohulls, most of the race boats now in the world, dinghies. Like if you can get up and go on the water, you're planing, that puts you into the category of like airplane and fluid dynamics where it really makes a difference. And the running joke with high performance catamaran owners is they like break their toothbrushes in half when they move on board because like every gram counts because the lighter your boat is, the less power it requires to get up on the surface of the water, and you're just much more efficient when you're on the surface. That also comes with a downside in that the waves are still the same, and so in certain sea states it's really uncomfortable to be planing for long periods of time. So that's where it really makes a difference. We and our hull shape and our boat, we will never be able to get up on a plane. That's not something our boat's designed to do. And so we will always be displacing water which means we have a maximum hull speed. That hull speed and the shape of our hull is the determining factor, not really how much weight we put in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main goal with this refit is to find a sweet balance, right? Because if the boat is heavy, it's more comfortable. If you think of all the heavy keeled boats, the full keeled boats,
full cruising boats.
Yeah, they're super comfortable offshore, but they're slow and heavy.
Yeah.
And the other side of the spectrum, like Tim was saying, is like the very high performance boat, the race boats are very, very light. They're not designed to live comfortably on. And Uma sails really well. She is a light enough boat. And especially the fact that she's electric, we want to prioritize sailability of the boat, but there is a sweet balance between sailability and comfort, and that's kind of where we're trying to aim at with the refit.
Definitely. And as you guys have seen, we've started to add stuff into the boat, like the bulkheads behind me, all these ribs and stringers. And I think that's where the comments started rolling in mostly, was once we started doing all this glass work. People were concerned about how much heavier Uma was going to be with all this added weight. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. Now we're not going into details as to every single gram that we're putting in and removing, because our brains just don't function that way. We're not going to calculate all those. Yeah. But we know generally for the big items what we had before and what we're replacing them with. And our goal mainly is to, whatever we take out, to replace it with some things, or in other areas replace it with something that's about the same weight or lighter, so that ultimately she sits just about the same as she used to, if not a little bit lighter than before. Let's dive into all of this. I have my notes with me so that we don't lose track too often. Let's talk about fiberglass. Fiberglass is obviously a big aspect of this refit.
Yeah, I think that's where most of the questions started rolling into, was once we started putting all of this glass in.
Yeah. How much do you think that we've put in with all this, all the glass work and the structures?
Down to a few kilos, we actually know exactly how much we put in, because we know how much glass we used and we know how much resin we used. We used a full roll of glass, so that's going to be about 50 kilos, and we used about 200 liters of resin. Now, some of that got pulled out in the peel ply, some of that got ground out, some of that probably got thrown away, when it cured in the bottom of a pot. Again, we're not weighing every single gram, but around 250 kilos we put in with all this new glass work that we did.
We have to take into consideration how much fiberglass we took out, because we took out a lot. Starting from the very first demo phase of the project, when we were grinding the inside of the hull.
Well, just taking this cabin liner out, like our boat, as you saw in our last video, we had a cabin liner that covered the underside of the deck. But we also had a hull liner, which is like a whole nother layer of fiberglass, and it's all chop strand mat, so it's quite heavy. It covered the whole cabin sole, but it also went up the hull in some places and into the V-berth in some places, and it had the sole of that was plywood. And so, gosh, taking that out had to have been at least 50 kilos, like at least 100 pounds.
Yeah.
Probably double that, but I'm being super conservative. That was probably 50, and the cabin liner was probably 50. And then also all the grinding dust that we took out. So all the grinding that we did, we vacuumed it all up and put it in trash bags. And I think we did about 3 over the course of all those demo projects. 3 trash bags were probably in the ballpark of 20-ish kilograms, a bag of concrete, pretty heavy amount of dust that we took out of the boat as well.
Yeah, and about 20 kilo each.
Yeah, so that's another 60. Yeah. So I think we did the math. What did we write down? Total we removed
150 kilo removed.
Yeah.
Give or take. And then all the glass, 270 kilo added.
Yeah. So, yes, the boat is about 100, what's the math on that? 100 kilograms lighter. That's like our weight. In the grand scheme of the entire boat, 100 kilos makes no difference at all.
But like we said before, that 120 kilo that we are adding in, we're going to be taking it out in another section of the refit. Yeah. So that brings us to the bulkheads, which is basically the phase that we're at right now.
Yeah.
I think taking back the bulkheads and putting them back in, even though they're different bulkheads, they're going to be more or less the same.
I think so. I mean, we're replacing with like. Most of the wood in our boat was 1/2-inch plywood. We're using 1/2-inch again, 12 millimeter, and it's just arranged in a slightly different manner. But again, all the plywood involved to build the hanging locker and the V-berth is probably not even 10 kilos. Like it's not a whole lot of weight. And so, yeah, grand total, we're probably putting in a decent amount of plywood back in the boat, but we also removed all that plywood already in similar locations. And so that's negligible. It's like for like again.
But one question that we've received a lot over the last couple of weeks is why aren't we using foam core bulkheads instead of plywood bulkheads?
Yeah, again, it seems like there's an obsession with making boats lighter and lighter, and if you're racing, that makes a difference. If you're cruising, it doesn't matter at all. And foam bulkheads is a good example. We've thought about it. I mean, it's having wood on a boat. Yeah, wood can potentially rot. We've had some rot on our boat, but our boat's 50 years old and it was not well taken care of. But the difficulty with foam bulkheads is you have to build the foam bulkhead. So you have to buy the div cell, get the glass, lay it on something super flat, and then get all the peel ply. You're laminating glass onto it, put something heavy on top to make sure it smooths it out, or vacuum bag it for best results. And that takes a long time and a lot of effort just to build something that's, since we're using plywood, it's already built, we're just cutting it. So it takes a long time to build it, and then you have to store it. You have to sort of build up your own supply of like pre-made fiberglass and foam bulkheads. And then you get to the stage where we're at now, where we're like templating and cutting them out. And of course, cutting wood is not hard on tools at all, whereas cutting fiberglass kind of destroys whatever you use.
And the thing is too, is that if it made a big difference into like how we wanted to sail this boat, then yes, we would have taken the time and effort to do that process. But because it's not that we're trying to be lazy by not doing foam bulkheads, but everything you do, you have to find the balance. You have to ask yourself, is it worth all the extra work for
time,
very
cost.
little gain?
Yeah, well, and again, if we were a high performance boat or a race boat or a catamaran where every gram counted, of course, fiberglass bulkheads makes a difference. But then if you're dealing with that side, then you need to be dealing with an engineer, so you know just exactly how much glass to be using. You need to calculate all of your tolerances so that you know, like race boats take a lot of engineering to get them down to exactly the right weight. Whereas for us, all of this is overkill anyway. It's insane. Like we could, with the ribs in, we could sail this boat without any bulkheads in at all, and she'd be stiffer than she was before. So everything we're putting back in is basically furniture, and we're just glassing it in so it doesn't squeak. And so, yeah, of course, foam bulkheads properly built are lighter and stronger, but they also cost a lot more. They're a lot more work, and they're a lot more difficult to work with once they're in the boat. You can't just like take a screw and put it into a foam bulkhead to mount a solar MPPT charger. Like you have to glass in a wood spacer and then screw into that, or glass in something else or some other mounting system. And so dealing with wood, it's just so much easier. Like mounting drawer slides, you just use a screw. Carpentry is just significantly easier than glasswork. To us, it's the extra labor, extra cost, extra time for no real added benefit in our boat.
Yeah. So that brings us to, I think, one of the biggest differences is the interior design decisions and materials.
I think that's where we're going to save the most weight.
For sure. In the very beginning, when we were doing the first interior, the second or third interior iteration of Uma, she looked beautiful. But we definitely did not even think too much about weight, because we were like, it doesn't really matter. She's comfortable. She sails well enough. Give or take a little bit. We didn't care.
It doesn't make that much difference, honestly. But like, if there's going to be a place we save weight, it's going to be in what we put back in as far as interior design decisions. You guys remember how we had like a marble backsplash and 2-inch or like 40 millimeter thick walnut nav desk? That thing had to have weighed probably 50 kilos on its own, 40 or 50 like that. It was probably equivalent of lifting you up. I mean, it was heavy.
For a table, it didn't need to be that. So I think when we do build new tables, what we will do is a thin layer on top, but core it with something lighter.
We'll probably use a veneer, but not actually veneer. Like we'll probably just use a few millimeter thick wood, but then
like 4 millimeter.
But then glass it down, like epoxy it down to a core, so it's lighter if we need to. There's some other, like the wood stove and the slate went underneath it, and the tile that went around that. That was pretty heavy. I don't think we're putting the wood stove back in. It didn't work as well as it was nice. We loved it, but it was on a boat the size of ours, it was pretty impractical to carry enough wood to actually keep the boat warm most of the time. But the issue is that regular like fir and and pine and the stuff that they had, it burns pretty quickly. And so we would go through a lot just to keep it going. It makes a lot of ash as well. We just couldn't carry enough wood to keep it running. We'd probably use like that much wood a day.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that burns a lot slower and hotter and cleaner are those like compressed logs, which is just like compressed sawdust. They had tons of those in Norway. You can buy them at every hardware store.
But they're heavy.
They're heavy, and then you're also paying for firewood, which to me is just like against my religion. Growing up, we chopped down trees and like made our own firewood. The problem with those compressed logs is you had to keep them super, super dry, because in a boat that's humid, as soon as they got kind of wet, it would just sort of expand and they would burn as well. And so they're really difficult to keep dry. So like, it was just kind of impractical to keep that much wood on the stove.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't even think about the wood we were carrying. That was another like probably 40 kilos of wood. So the wood stove and the wood, you know, that may have been close to like 100 kilograms.
I think this is where a lot of people skip or don't like consider a lot of the times is the structure of the boat. Yes, like the weight of it matters, but more importantly, it's the equipment and the personal things that you decide to put in that actually matters the most, because that's if you live on the boat, how much personal things you put in is going to be a lot of weight. Like try to think of how much wood you have in your bedroom alone, right? And
nobody cares about weight in a house.
Yeah, and so on the boat, that really matters. So to segue out of our digression with the wood stove and into the equipment that we're going to be putting in, I think some areas it's going to be about the same. Like the electric motor is going to be the same.
Pretty much all the electronics, the inverter and the chargers, all of that stuff we're keeping because it all worked well and it's good.
Yeah. I think where it's going to make a big difference are the batteries, because the batteries are going to change and we're going to increase our battery range.
Yeah, we're definitely going to increase our battery capacity. The cool thing is that lithium technology has changed so much in the last 5 to 10 years. We can now, these numbers aren't quite exact, but we can basically, for double the weight of our previous battery bank, we can triple the capacity in like a similar footprint. It's kind of nuts. That's like the main big ticket one, because that's like 150 kilos more weight that we're just adding. But again, in the grand scheme of things, like 150 kilos, like it's easy to lose that somewhere else. You know, because, well, the main one is interior design decisions.
Yeah.
But the other main one, for 10 years, we've been hoarding boat building materials, because we knew at one point we were going to be doing this renovation since day one, because we knew we were kind of like patching the boat together to see how well she sails, see if we like sailing her, see if we like sailing. And so we've been like keeping every scrap and every bit and every piece. Not only did we have that marble installed, we had like 5 or 6 more sheets of that marble in case one broke or in case we wanted to put it somewhere else. We kept tile from the wood stove. We've kept a lot of electrical cable, like even the really big like 4/0 stuff, knowing we were going to be rewiring stuff. We
Plumbing
kept
stuff.
3 gallons of like the big gallon tins of the Kiwi Grip, because we knew that Kiwi Grip doesn't work well in the Arctic, and so we knew we were going to have to like replace it when we came back. So, but getting the color to match, we kept it. The entire V-berth, everything underneath our V-berth was spare parts and boat building supplies and tools, like full saws and everything. So once this renovation's done, we'll be able to get rid of a lot of that stuff, and that's a huge weight. Like that's hundreds of kilos worth of stuff that we were carrying around.
And of course, we're going to be keeping some spare parts, some important spare parts, some plumbing things, electronic things. But yeah, we don't need to have tools to build a whole new boat on this boat anymore.
There's some other equipment choices that, like, we used the Hurricane anchor that one time in Haiti, and the reality is our Rockna would have held us just as well, because it's already 2 sizes too big. Because we've actually been in 70 to 80 knots of wind multiple times since then, and the anchor held fine. I think, and it's not just the anchor. Our anchor was 55 kilograms, so like 120 pounds or something, 125. But it's also the 2 anchor rods that went with it, so we're carrying around at least another 100, 150 kilos of chain and rope and everything just for that system that like we've only used once in 10 years. And the reality is we probably would have been fine without it. So we're debating if we're going to keep that on board as well, since our main anchor is so oversized anyway. What would probably be a better solution would be to get maybe like the new Mantis anchor that is just 2 pieces and keep that as like a secondary anchor, like a backup, or just have more chain on our primary anchor.
That would be the other option.
Having a backup anchor is important because like you can lose your anchor, you can get it stuck in a rock and not be able to get it out in 30 meters of water. Like you could break a pin or something like that and actually lose the anchor. So that is important to carry a secondary, but it doesn't have to be a full 50 kilo one. So the anchor and the chain, let's call that 100 kilos. If we added double our chain, that's only 60 more kilos or something. So like it's definitely would be lighter. I don't even know if we double the chain. We'd probably just add rope on the end of it. We're also probably not going to carry as many spare sails. We've been carrying around all of our old sails because we weren't really sure how long sails last. But as we've seen, like our sails, the guys at Precision just like insanely overbuilt them when we told them we were going to the Arctic and stuff like that. So they're still like as crispy as the day we put them on 5 years ago.
They feel still new.
And the things that can break, we have like slugs and little tethers and lines and stuff. We have replacements for those, but I don't think we need to carry a full set of spare sails.
That's true, because if you guys remember, we did like a whole tour of all the sails that we had, and it filled up the entire cockpit.
Yeah, and all those sails weigh a lot.
Yeah, I think we can keep the ones that we need, but we don't need 3 backup mainsails. I think that's a bit overkill.
And a full backup jib. Like if we carried like a storm, like a storm sail, our main roller jib, code 0 spinnaker for the head sails, and then 1 mainsail, I think would be fine. Because like if one sail actually totally just completely blows out, you still have the other one, and we've learned that you're going to sail slower, but we'll be sailing at 4.5 knots instead of 6.5 knots or something. Like you can still get to where you need to go. Oh, the other big one is we've been carrying around a gas generator, a gas outboard, 2 jugs plus the dinghy. Let's just say filled up 75 liters of petrol, like if they're full. Plus we've been carrying like 4 jugs of extra water, so like 100 extra liters of water in the cockpit. Those are all decisions that we're going to be like working on and figuring out if there's better solutions for as well as we go. Those are the big systems. The cockpit lockers could be significantly lighter. Yeah. Because that's what we've been carrying this stuff around for 10 years, and we just have learned either not to need it or to avoid the situations where you would need it. The other complication with what we're doing with this renovation is because we're flipping a lot of things around, it has the potential to throw off the actual balance of the boat, like fore and aft and side to side. And so trimming the boat once she's in the water is something we're going to have to do with the equipment that we put back on the boat and how we lay out the storage of the boat. So all of the stuff that's getting glassed in, if we just put the boat in the water as is, she'd probably sit a little heavier on one side or the other. But that's something we control by trimming out the stores on board. So we could put heavier canned goods on one side and books or tools or the inverter or sails or chain, like you can, or which side you store the petrol and the generator on. That has a lot to do with trimming the boat, and that's something we've done already in previous old UMA. And so, yes, moving the head from one side to the other has the potential to throw the balance of the boat off, but the stuff we're storing in all of the lockers has a lot more to do with how that boat's going to get trimmed than where the lockers are located, for instance.
And moving the batteries in the water tanks as well to like a more centralized.
For instance, we liked our bow to be a little bit lighter so that she didn't kind of smash into waves quite as much. And so we were a little bit more stern heavy. We talked about that in the level video. But we're also moving the batteries from the cockpit into the salon to be centered over the keel. So they're actually going to have a better effect on the boat. Where we install the equipment when we put it back on is definitely going to have some effect. And then just where we store our stuff. The other one that kind of ties into weight is our standing rigging. We're contemplating doing synthetic rigging when we go back because it's a lot of stainless cable and a lot of stainless fittings up the mast. And the further you get from the keel and the water line, the more effect that weight has because it's like a lever arm, obviously. It's something along the lines of like 7 to 1. So if we can take 1 kilogram off of our standing rigging, it's like adding 7 kilos to the keel. Like the keel is more effective. And so that is going to have a much more significant impact on the performance of the boat than whether or not we are storing extra water on a long passage, or whether or not that bulkhead weighs 4 more kilos than that bulkhead or something like that. So there are some places where you can sort of leverage that to your advantage, but we'll get into that when we get into that. That's a long way down the road.
Yeah.
But these are all like individual decisions that as a whole add up to a big picture. And so yes, technically every gram counts, right? Like what's the military saying? Ounces are pounds and pounds are pain, or something like that. Where like if you're carrying weight long enough, but on a boat and a slow boat and a cruising boat and a displacement hull like ours, you know, we could add 15 people, we could add 10 people on board while we're sailing, and like unless we were match racing against an identical hull, you would not notice a difference.
Yeah. And there's so many ways to make a boat lighter, right? From like carbon fiber toilets to
well, the foam core bulkheads and using
bulkheads.
epoxies, and so you can like use less glass and like, I mean, but we're not a race boat.
No, like we've said many times again, lighter doesn't necessarily mean better.
Yeah.
Depends on what you're trying to do with the boat.
Unless you're racing.
If we were trying to race with this boat, we would have refitted completely differently. Because
Yeah,
we
of
would have
course.
taken racing in mind and lightness in mind and like day races, not necessarily liveaboards. But
You know, just like that slider. So if there was like a slider, things that went like, you know, light versus heavy, expensive versus cheap, comfort versus speed, ease versus difficulty. You know, you can slide those around and figure out what's best for you. But like the lighter you make a boat, the less comfortable it's probably going to be. But it's also going to go faster. But it's also going to be more expensive, and it's going to be harder to maintain and work with. And so cruising boats tend to be heavy and slow and cheap and easy to work on. And race boats tend to be expensive, light, hard to work on, and fast and uncomfortable. And so like all of those things are on sliding spectrums, and every boat kind of slides those sliders back and forth to find out what works for them.
Yeah.
We do need to keep the performance of this boat because we are electric, which means we do need to like sail upwind and be able to tack easily. But that has more to do with like sail handling. And we know this boat already sails really well. That's why we're rebuilding her, because she's already a good hull shape. And the fact that we noticed a significant difference in how well she sailed just by glassing over the hull deck joint. That made the boat stiff enough that she already sailed better. Now we're like 100xing that factor. So I'm quite excited to get out and sail on the boat again, because like just the stiffness alone will add more performance to the boat than any extra weight would take away from the boat. That's like a whole nother spectrum that's hard to quantify, because yes, okay, maybe let's just say hypothetically the boat's going to be 1 ton heavier, like 2,000 kilograms heavier when we dump, which is extreme.
I feel like it's not.
It's not going to be, but I'm just saying, even if it was, the fact that she's this much stiffer will add more performance, which will probably make her sail better, even if she is heavier. Which
So it's
is like,
going to be worth it anyway.
which is like a whole nother spectrum to think about.
Yeah.
The 150 kilos we added in the glass and ribs are going
Not
to
gonna make
far
anything.
outshine any of like the weight that's going to slow us down.
Yeah.
So
But I really hope that some of our answers answered your questions.
yeah.
And let us know in a comment below if you have more questions. And I feel like this video needed to happen because we
Yeah.
were getting enough questions that we couldn't just reply to everybody.
Yeah, I think at some point when we have more definitive answers, we'll do a video like this about cost as
Yes.
well, because that was the other question we get a lot of. You know, why are we renovating an old boat? Wouldn't it be cheaper just buy a new one? Blah, blah, blah.
We'll
But
have a video about that.
for right
sure.
now, it doesn't really make sense because it would all just be insane speculation. We do have a pretty good understanding of how much we're putting back in the boat as far as weight is concerned. As far as cost is concerned, like we have an idealistic, optimistic budget that when we run out, hopefully we'll have the boat built.
Done.
We'll do that video nearing the end when we actually have like real numbers of how much everything cost us.
Yeah.
But short answer is, if it was cheaper to buy a new boat, we'd be doing that. Like,
All right, guys. Well, that is it for us. And hopefully this was helpful. Give it a thumbs up. If you learned something new, or if you have more questions, or if you just enjoyed listening to us talk. But we'll see you guys next time. Cheers.